Hello, I'm Joy Thomas with Number Story and the ACE Resource Network, and I'm so excited to be here with an incredible powerhouse of a person and a leader, someone I personally admire so much, Lori Poland. Thank you, Lori, so much for being with me here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, truly,
Oh,
because I feel the exact same about you.
thank you. I am so excited. I've gotten to know you a little bit as the co-founder and executive director of the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, known as ENDCan. You travel nationally as a motivational speaker, talking about possibilities after trauma,
Yeah.
becoming a transcender, which I just love that word, that concept, and also the ripple effects of trauma on children and families. And you are also an author, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Your newly published memoir titled I Live Here, Learning to Heal Through Embracing Your Story. I just finished reading it this weekend. I took my time with it. It's one that I savored and put down and came back to a lot. And what a powerful and moving story. And thank you so much for sharing it with the world, with me. It's an amazing story. Thank you. And I know you've been sharing your story in many ways for many years, and uh, as a speaker, as I mentioned, but also a leader, a connector of survivors and organizations and supporters creating change together. But can you tell us a little bit about what this process was like, your role as an author, embracing your story by writing a very personal and incredibly powerful memoir, and then putting it out here in the world? What has
Yeah.
this been like for you?
What's funny is I have Aaron Harbour, he has a TV show and a radio show, and he's just a bombshell. He's just like his mere existence is strength. And so he said to me 3.5 years ago, Lori, you just need to write a book. Just get it done, get it out. It'll only take a couple of months and it'll be good. Just make it small, but get it out. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I thought I set a 6 month deadline and I thought I would get her done. And it wasn't like that at all.
Mm,
um, the experience of doing my own research and processing things that I had known through narrative, my abduction. So I was abducted in 1983, and that's a lot of what the book is stemmed around. I was only 3, so my memory of it was so limited, and yet I've had a lot of narrative told to me throughout my life, and that narrative I had to confirm, I had to understand, I had to get a greater lens around. So I spent a lot of time in the beginning talking to a lot of people that were there, as well as reading all of the files and all the court reports and all the medical records and clinical records and everything. And it was just a big process. So it took a minute. It took 3 years to write and then another 6 months to publish just because of fear.
mm, wow. How does it feel now that it's published?
It's like a coin. There is, well, maybe it's not like a coin. It's like an iceberg.
Mm,
The iceberg the part of the iceberg that's exposed is terrified. And um, I know a huge part of my delay in publication of my story, I've been asked for a lot of years to write it. But a huge part of that delay is just the impact
mm,
and how, as trauma survivors, well, really, as humans, we all have different recollections of experience. And so it's kind of like when a car accident happens, the cops don't bring everybody together and say, okay, what did you see? They separate everybody and ask their own personal narrative because everybody sees and experiences things from their
mm,
own lens. And in my experience for my kidnapping, it every single human I've ever met that was around during that time and remembers it differently. And so I had to do both my own personal exploration, but also this phenomenological research project to understand the commonalities and the common themes, to really grasp like the reality and the impact of my story. And so the whole rest of the iceberg is where, like, I mean, there's just a lot of richness in all of it. And knowing that there are a few, very small few people, just a couple of people that are adamantly against the story. And those people are really like the closest people in my life. And so when those people disagree with you or say, you know, or change the story, because that's what's happened, it's been a lot. And so having it out has been both beautiful and a lot underneath all of it. So
No, I can
long answer.
imagine that's so much. You committed your career to this cause, really not just your career, your
Life.
life,
Mhm.
to ending child abuse and neglect and helping heal the cycles and the ripple effects. And I have a feeling, and we know that there are a lot of other survivors in helping professions whose personal stories might inform our missions in life. But I'm wondering, hearing this and what you're going through, putting this out in the world, what are some ways that you took care of yourself during the 3 years of writing I Live Here, and how do you continue to take care of yourself, um, putting your story out in the world, and even as you continue to do the work that you do, knowing that it taps into your own personal trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. And the residual effects of that trauma, right? Um, so just the last 72 hours, I've said this a couple of times to a number of people. I've had a lot of people self-disclose in the last 4 days, which is beautiful. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? But what a lot of people have asked is, how did you get through that process? And I've just had this epiphany that um, every time I felt whatever it was that I was feeling, I allowed myself to feel that.
Mm,
So when I first started, I got through page 1 of my clinical note and I lost it. I had a complete breakdown. I emailed my treating psychiatrist in the UK at like 4 a.m. his time and was like, I need to talk to you right now. um, um, I just allowed myself to be wherever it was that I was. And I think that's what took so long, was there
mm,
were times where I was like paralyzed in fear. There were times where I was angry with rage. And I don't really operate out of an angry place very often. I mean, occasionally I do get mad, but it's not really my MO. I try really hard to be what I need, which is love and nurturing. And so when I'm sad, I'm sad. And when I cry. And when I'm happy. And what's really neat is that just in the last 72 hours, I talked to my therapist about this and my partner. And I've had this realization that when I allow myself just to be wherever I'm at, I get through it really quickly and I don't stay stuck, because it's like a stream or like a river, it just keeps moving. And I just move right through it. And so, and I like take on the next boulder that I'm gonna, whatever comes next, I just kind of handle that as it comes.
wow, that's a really beautiful testament to the power of
So now,
feeling our feelings, that allowing the embodiment
yeah,
of our emotions, and
yeah,
something a lot of us, I think, struggle with when
without a doubt.
we haven't been able to do that safely. And that's really a beautiful thing to hear. You can be in that flow, and the pain can flow right through you too, and you can keep on
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah. Well, and Joy, I learned at the age of 3, it was my first realization that I was alone. And I spent 4 days in the bottom of a toilet by myself at an age where a human needs another person to feed and touch and take care of them. And I learned at a very young age that I couldn't depend on that. And so while that has been my trigger and that has been my trauma, it's also been my survival mechanism of like, just be wherever I'm at. And I didn't realize that. I've only realized that in the last few weeks of being re-traumatized and abused, honestly, in the last 2 weeks since my book came out by those people that were supposed to love and protect me. And it's hard every time, but I just keep doing it and keep showing up and knowing that I have to be with me. And that's all I can count on. And I can't let anything or anyone else interfere with whatever that response is.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
for sharing
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Something that really resonated with me as I read is how important it can be to feel like our stories belong to
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
And I think for many of us who suffered or experienced some significant adversities
Mhm.
when we were children, we may face obstacles to feeling like we can fully share or make decisions about, or sometimes even access our own stories. You mentioned going back and finding people who were there and looking up history around what happened. And um, sometimes
People don't have
being
that.
able to do that, or even hearing different versions, or even being denied any conversation about it, or denial
Oh,
altogether that
yeah,
anything
right. Just
happened, or
yeah.
or I there's phrases that echo back like that's not your story to tell, that
Oh,
resonated powerfully. And I think um we're not alone in that, in the world, that sometimes grown-ups feel more entitled to children's
stories
stories because um you know
of their
they
own stuff.
they remember them in
Yeah.
their way. And I'm wondering if there's any insight you might be able to offer to anyone listening or watching or reading your story, who might be carrying the weight of an untold story. um we're not all going to publish memoirs, right? But is
Yeah.
there any insight you might have, or any advice or any thoughts you might offer to folks holding their stories?
Thank you for asking that question, Joy. And in this very moment of reliving that as we speak. Um, and I knew, and everybody said, well, you saw this coming when your book was published. You knew that your story was going to be disputed and that people were going to try and take your story from you, which happens oh so often to
Mm,
survivors. And so, you knew this was coming. And I've even told my staff, well, I'm like ugly crying on Tuesday morning, just a couple days ago with my staff. And I said to them, it's kind of like a boxer, right? They know they're getting in the rink and they know they're going to get hit and they know they're going to bleed and they know they're going to have this recovery process afterwards. But none of that knowing takes away from the pain of the punch, the redness of the blood, the the healing that you have to go through afterwards. Then it's like knowing you're going to die or sudden death. What's the benefit of both, right? And I'm in that right now.
mm,
And what I know I am so blessed to have is I had a very public story. Well, that certainly had a lot of underbelly awfulness. It also documented what happened just during my kidnapping, not all the other
right.
stuff and the residual impacts and the ripple effect of adversity, right? We don't have voice and value for that. We really don't. And my book, I really tried to amplify that. And I was so lucky to have court reports and testimony and video coverage and even my own forensic interview, it wasn't called that in 1983, but I have my own videos of me saying exactly what happened to me. And as a clinician, being able to translate that for myself and with colleagues. And I mean, I'm so lucky to have that. And the majority, like way more, like my guess would be close to 95+% of survivors don't have that. And so what happens to us is that when we have those protective people in our lives that don't protect us or that minimize or take that story, it it creates that self-doubt that was already planted during our abuse. Because when a child is it has those adverse experiences in any of the ACEs, right? They're not all abusive, but when a child has what I call a major attachment disruption, which are essentially the ACEs, it changes their brain chemistry. It changes their knowing. It changes their worldview. And that is the seed. And every time they're denied or robbed of that story, it's just water. And so what I would say to my fellow survivors or my fellow lived experiencers, I would say to all of us that, first of all, what you know to be true is your truth. And if you can own just your truth without needing to prove or disprove or verify or justify any of it, when you can own that, you begin to let the candle within become brighter. And that's where our light begins to shine in a unified way. And the silence is what the perpetrators count on. The silence is what the shamed need. And I wish so badly that the people that feel anger and shame and resentment towards me for sharing my story, I wish so badly that they would heal, because I recognize their anger is coming from shame and guilt and fear, and I can't own that for them. I can't hold that for them anymore. It's either do that for them, which I've been doing for 38 years, 39, or help somebody else who is begging and crying and lonely. And I know what it feels like to be alone. And I don't want anybody to feel that way because of this, because of other people's pain. So the abuse carries on when we are silenced. That's just one more toggle of another form of adversity. And every single time you're silenced or rejected or denied or avoided or any of those things, it's one more penny in the jar. And that weighs so much. And I say, like, let's crack that jar. Let's throw that jar. Like, let's be rid of it because this is just mine. Just mine.
That's really beautiful. Can you just, I think to bring us home here, can you speak briefly to the flip side of that there's that weight of not being able to tell our story or when we're denied our story, but a little more to that lighting of our candles and what happens when we bring that light together, that because that's something that spoke to me throughout your book and your story, and even just knowing you a little bit as a person, is that your light is it just refuses to be dimmed, and it's amazing. And I see you using your flame to help light others when they need that spark, and to give them the bravery, and to give them that affirmation of those words you just spoke, that your truth is yours. And um, the power of storytelling. Can you speak to that a little bit? The power of telling your story. You
Yeah.
speak a little about all the different places you've told your story and all the ways it can help change in the world. But what happens if we share our stories? what happens if all our different stories that are from so many different perspectives, what happens if we're able to share? What
Yeah. I mean, I would just use two two quotes. One is that many hands make light work, and rising tides raise all ships. And or something like that. I'm sure I botched that second one, but I do that all the time. So one thing that I have been honored to witness is the power of collectivism. And growing up in the age of communication advancement, I've watched so many things come into more of a public platform, not individually, but holistically, as in a communal sort of way. And that's through equal rights, through human rights, through women's liberation, through LGBT movement, through suicide awareness, through breast cancer awareness. I mean, all heart disease, all of the things that once, if you had breast cancer, you went and got treatment and you were home by 5 and you're making dinner, nobody knew. And now if you have breast cancer, you proudly, you know you wear pink, you show up on a Saturday morning in a tutu, and every person that knows you is with you, and not because they have lived experience, because they support you. And if we can do that for all of those things, I'm like, bring it. There is so much possibility for what we can do for child abuse, and really helping parents and adults love and protect our children in a healthier way. And I think the one thing that Henry Kemp was so good at saying is that abusive parents love their children very much, just not very well. And it's our job to teach them to do that better. And so that power of story, to me, is us teaching our community to look out for and protect our children better. And so I just invite everybody, whether you have your own lived experience or somebody with lived experience, I invite every single person to stand forward and to live in their own truth, not denying or fighting with anybody else's truth, but just live in yours. And if we can do that, we can truly end childhood adversities and truly lead to healthier, safe, secure upbringings of the humans that we're trying, like the humans that we're going to count on to lead us someday. So it just gives me so much hope.
and your story is one that's full of hope. That's something that was incredibly moving to me. Your um incredible transformation, your transcendence, truly. You've been through some of the darkest depths of human experience, and you're now a leader, a torchbearer for others, and a change maker in this field and in so many individual lives and in the collective, truly. So, thank you so much for sharing with us today and for the work that you are continuing to do every day. And we can all help join Lori in helping bring an end to child abuse and neglect at ENDCan.org. And you can check out Lori's moving memoir, I Live Here, Learning to Heal Through Embracing Your Story. Thank you so much, Lori.
Joy, thanks for your work too. I believe in you. I love you. I value you. And I want to do everything and anything I can to support you.
Oh, thank you. That's so
Yeah.
mutual. Thank you so much, Lori.